Ferrari officially unveiled the SF-26 at Fiorano as its first car of the 2026 regulatory era. The launch came via a short video rather than a full-scale presentation, but the visual changes were immediately clear. A heavier use of white alongside Ferrari's traditional red, the return of gloss paint after 7 seasons of matte finishes, and a clean, high-contrast engine cover dominated by sponsor branding. Beneath the surface, however, the technical shift is far more significant. Ferrari has adopted pushrod suspension at both ends for the first time since 2011, reworked the car's architecture entirely, and built the layout around the new 2026 power unit split evenly between electrical and combustion energy. Within hours of the unveiling, Lewis Hamilton took the SF-26 out at Fiorano for its first shakedown, in front of thousands of tifosi who had gathered from early morning. This was Ferrari's so-called Spec A car, meaning the objective was not performance exploration, but system validation, data correlation, and early reliability checks ahead of private testing in Spain and the official Bahrain sessions. But midway through that brief running, a moment quickly went viral. The Ferrari came to a halt on track and had to be recovered to the garage. Naturally, speculation followed about technical failures, power unit issues, or even deeper concept problems emerging on day one. Yet the reality is more nuanced and far more revealing about Ferrari's priorities and operational approach in the opening phase of its 2026 program. So why did the Ferrari SF-26 actually stop on track? And what does that moment really tell us about where this project is heading? Stay with the video to the end to get the full breakdown. And if you want more analysis like this, consider subscribing. The key to understanding the stoppage lies in what Ferrari had actually brought to Fiorano. This was not a performance spec car, and it was never intended to explore lap time or balance. Team principal Fred Vasseur had already framed this phase as about validation rather than speed. In this situation, the most important thing is to get mileage, he said. It's not to chase performance, it's to get mileage to validate the technical choices on the car in terms of reliability, and then to get performance. That philosophy shaped everything about Ferrari's approach to the SF-26's first public outing. Technically, the SF-26 represents Ferrari's biggest architectural reset in over a decade. Technical director Loic Serra described the car as a complete rethink of the car's architecture, explaining that Ferrari spent unusually long in the concept phase to adapt to the combined impact of new chassis rules, a radically different power unit formula, and the introduction of active aerodynamics. We dedicated significant time to the concept phase to capture as much as possible of the new regulatory and technical context, Serra said. We also had to ensure that the car's architecture would allow us enough flexibility for in-season development. That rethink is most visible in the suspension. Ferrari has returned to pushrod suspension at both the front and rear for the first time since 2011, reversing more than a decade of pull rod rear layouts. While Ferrari has not detailed the aerodynamic reasoning publicly, the change reflects broader packaging priorities driven by the new power unit and cooling requirements, as well as how airflow is managed under the 2026 regulations. Observers at Fiorano also noted that the driver appears to sit further forward in the chassis than on rival cars revealed so far, suggesting Ferrari has reshaped mass distribution to suit the new rules. Visually, the SF-26 is restrained rather than aggressive. Compared to some rivals' early 2026 cars, Ferrari's design looks clean and conventional, with smooth surfaces and relatively simple shapes. The most distinctive feature is the serrated edge along the top of the engine cover before it blends into the long shark fin mandated by the regulations. That shark fin, returning after several seasons away, is intended to stabilize airflow to the rear wing, and Ferrari's interpretation fits with a broader emphasis on efficiency and low drag. The livery reinforces the sense of reset. Ferrari has reintroduced gloss paint after 7 years of matte finishes and increased the amount of white alongside its traditional red, describing the look as a way to connect past and present. The stark white engine cover recalls Ferrari designs from earlier eras, but beyond aesthetics, the livery signals a symbolic break from recent seasons as the team enters a new technical cycle. Once the SF-26 rolled out of the garage, attention inevitably shifted to Lewis Hamilton. This was his first public running in a Ferrari Formula One car, and thousands of tifosi had gathered around Fiorano from early morning to witness it. Hamilton completed the installation lap on full wet tyres in cold and overcast conditions, waving to fans as he circulated. He then completed a short 2-lap run, including 1 lap behind a camera car and another independently, followed by a practice start. From Ferrari's perspective, however, the symbolism of Hamilton's debut mattered less than the procedural objectives of the day. This shakedown was registered as a demonstration event rather than a filming day or promotional run, meaning Ferrari was restricted to just 15 kilometers of running. At Fiorano, that equates to roughly 5 laps. With Charles Leclerc also scheduled to complete a couple of laps in the SF-26 shortly afterwards, Ferrari had to manage that mileage precisely to avoid breaching the regulations. It was in that context that the stoppage occurred. After completing his short run and practice start, Hamilton brought the car to a halt on the straight near pit entry, and it was recovered to the garage. Footage quickly circulated showing the Ferrari stationary on track, with Hamilton briefly restarting and moving a few meters before stopping again. From some angles, it appeared as though the car had suffered a sudden technical failure. Ferrari, however, moved quickly to clarify that there was no mechanical issue. A spokesperson told the race that the stoppage was deliberate and purely procedural, explaining that Ferrari had reached the mileage limit imposed by the demonstration event. There were no issues, the team confirmed, adding that the car was stopped simply because Ferrari had to remain within the 15-kilometer allowance. With Leclerc still due to run, Ferrari needed to ensure that Hamilton's laps did not consume the entire allocation. That explanation fits the sequence of events. Hamilton's running totaled exactly the number of laps Ferrari could afford, and stopping on track rather than returning to the garage appears to have been a controlled way of ending the session at the precise moment the mileage target was reached. The slightly awkward positioning of the car and the brief restart attempt likely reflected the timing of the call from the pit wall rather than any technical concern. Still, the speed with which speculation erupted highlights how sensitive early running has become, particularly under a new regulatory cycle. Any stoppage, however benign, is immediately interpreted as evidence of deeper reliability or concept problems. That sensitivity is amplified in Ferrari's case because of the weight of expectations surrounding its 2026 project, following a strategic decision to divert resources early from the 2025 season. Ferrari's early pivot to 2026 development came at a visible short-term cost. The team slipped from 2nd to 4th in the Constructors' Championship over the final 8 races of 2025, sacrificing prize money and momentum. Hamilton endured his first Formula One season without a podium finish, and both drivers publicly voiced frustration. But Vasseur defended the decision, calling it rational and arguing Ferrari was not realistically positioned to catch McLaren. "If you asked them today whether they would redo the decision, I think they would agree with it," he said. Crucially, that drop in championship position granted Ferrari additional aerodynamic testing time under the sliding scale regulations, giving it more development resource than McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull heading into the 2026 reset. Vasseur has consistently argued that under such a sweeping rule change, early concept work and correlation matter more than marginal gains in the final year of the outgoing regulations. Ahead of this kind of reset, extra development time is worth more than money, he has said. The SF-26 therefore represents the tangible outcome of that strategic gamble. Ferrari has described it as a robust and flexible concept, designed to evolve as more data is gathered from real-world running. That flexibility is especially important under the 2026 regulations, which combine a radically different power unit formula with a 50-50 split between electrical and combustion energy, with active aerodynamics and mandates to reduce car size and weight. The challenge is not simply to optimize individual systems, but to integrate them into a coherent package. Hamilton's feedback from Fiorano, while not detailed publicly, was understood internally to be positive in terms of baseline systems behavior, which was the primary objective of the day. Ferrari's focus at this stage is on ensuring that cooling systems function correctly, that electronic architectures integrate smoothly with the new hybrid systems, and that there are no fundamental issues with packaging or assembly. Performance exploration and aerodynamic mapping come later, during private testing and the official Bahrain sessions. That context also explains why Ferrari chose to run on full wet tyres, despite dry conditions. The goal was not to generate representative aerodynamic data or extract lap times, but to conduct safe, conservative running that minimized the risk of damage or misleading information. Within that framework, stopping the car once the mileage target had been reached, even if that meant doing so on track, is entirely consistent with Ferrari's objectives for the shakedown. Ferrari's broader testing program reflects that structured approach. Following Fiorano, the team will head to Spain for a 5-day behind-closed-doors test, during which each team is permitted to run on 3 days. 2 official pre-season tests will then follow in Bahrain from 11th to 13th February and 18th to 20th February, ahead of the season-opening Australian Grand Prix on 8th March. Only during those sessions will Ferrari begin exploring the SF-26's performance characteristics in meaningful depth. In that sense, Fiorano was never about performance headlines. It was about confirming that the car functions as designed and that the transition from simulation to reality does not reveal immediate red flags. Serra's emphasis on correlation is critical here. The value of early running lies not in absolute numbers, but in whether the data aligns with expectations. If cooling efficiency, suspension behavior, and systems integration behave as predicted, Ferrari can proceed confidently into more intensive testing phases. The decision to unveil and run the car in public, rather than conduct a private shakedown away from cameras, also reflects a degree of confidence in the project's baseline integrity. Ferrari was well aware that any incident would be filmed and dissected, yet still chose Fiorano, a venue accessible from public roads and heavily populated by tifosi. That openness inevitably amplifies scrutiny, but it also aligns with Ferrari's tradition of engaging fans directly in moments of transition. Hamilton's presence added another layer of significance. His arrival at Ferrari is one of the defining narratives of the 2026 cycle, and his first laps in red carried symbolic weight beyond their technical importance. But from Ferrari's operational perspective, his role was primarily procedural. Execute the installation lap, provide initial system feedback, and confirm that the car behaves broadly as expected. The fact that he was entrusted with the first running rather than Leclerc underlines Ferrari's intent to integrate him fully into the technical program from the outset. Importantly, there is nothing in the available evidence to suggest that the stoppage had any technical implications for Ferrari's subsequent plans. No delays to the Spanish test program were reported, and Ferrari did not indicate any need for remedial work or system changes as a result of the Fiorano running. On the contrary, the team described the shakedown as a successful validation exercise, with focus now shifting to gathering more representative data over longer runs. That does not mean the SF-26 is without risk. Every regulatory reset introduces uncertainties, particularly when power unit architecture, aerodynamics, and vehicle dynamics are all changing simultaneously. Ferrari's return to pushrod suspension at both ends represents a departure from its recent design lineage and will carry aerodynamic and mechanical implications that only extended testing can fully reveal. Likewise, the integration of the new hybrid system and active aerodynamics will pose operational challenges affecting energy deployment, cooling strategies, and raceability. But none of those risks were exposed or even meaningfully probed at Fiorano. The shakedown was simply not designed to reveal them. Instead, it served as a controlled environment in which Ferrari could confirm that the SF-26 is fundamentally functional, safe to run, and broadly aligned with its simulation models. Within that framework, the stoppage becomes not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of procedural discipline, halting running precisely when the regulatory mileage cap had been reached. Ultimately, the real story of Ferrari's SF-26 shakedown is not that the car stopped on track, but that it did exactly what it was designed to do: complete its allotted mileage, validate its core systems, and allow the team to move forward with confidence into the next phase of testing. The significance lies less in the optics of a stationary car and more in the procedural discipline that led to that outcome. So the question is this: was Ferrari's Fiorano stoppage simply a procedural footnote, or does it hint at something deeper about how aggressively the team is managing risk and regulation as it enters the most disruptive rules era in a decade? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and tell me whether you see this as a sign of confidence or caution from Ferrari.